Hello dear students, welcome to the second module of the research methodology. The first module we discuss the first module we discuss what you mean by the research and types of the research and what you mean by hypothesis, when a hypothesis and objectives are connected and different types of research design. And this second module we are going to discuss what you mean by the sampling and the population. This is the first lecture regarding the sampling and the population. And we're discussing what you mean by the population, what is a sample, what is the sampling theory, and the method of the sampling. Okay, so I think you're familiar with the entire elements in the degree classes. We're just refreshing what you mean by the term is sample and population, because samples and populations are one of the important part of the research methodology. Whenever we're conducting the research, we are opting for the samples and the population. So let's start the what you mean by this population and the sample. So population and the sample. As a statistical term, the population means it's a totality, and sample means it's a part of the population. So the population is a data that contains all the members of the specific group. That means suppose you are living in Thrissur, and the population of Thrissur means that the total number of the people are living in Thrissur. Suppose you are taking the 50 numbers from this Thrissur, that is sampled. So that is a logical connection between the population and the sample. So population is a data set containing all the members of the specific group. That means totality. As samples means is a part of the population. So there is a symbol, the diagram. So there is a population and there is sample. The population means there is a totality. The total number of the people are living in the locality or the districts or the country or the state. And the samples means there is a drawing the certain part. Suppose you are selecting the 10 or the 50 members from the population, that is a sample. That means it's like a subset of the population, and the size of the sample always less than the size of the population. That is a logical element. So the size of the sample is always less than your size of the population. So as a research point of view, it is very important element to deciding the population and sample. Whether your population is finite or infinite depends upon the research. Okay, suppose your finite population can use the simple random methods. Otherwise population is infinite, we are opting for the non-probability sampling methods. So that is the connection of the population and the sampling methods. So we discussed what you mean by the population and what is a sample. A population is always the total number. That means all elements are including the study. And samples means a part of the population. That means subset of the population. The size of the sample is always less than the size of the population. Okay, and this is the meaning of the population and the sample. And let's going to discuss what you mean by the sampling theory. So just look at the diagram. You are the population and there is a sample. You are selecting the samples from the population, and this process selecting the population from selecting the samples from the population is known as the sampling theory. A sampling theory is like a study of the relationship existing between the population and the samples drawn from the population. How the samples are drawn from the population. And this process, the samples are drawn from the population. The process is known as the sampling theory. That means sampling theory is applicable only to the random samples. You are randomly selected. That means equal chances. The random means there is equal chances. The term is known as the sampling theory. How we select the samples from the population. That is known as the sampling theory. നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് സാമ്പിൾസ് എടുക്കുന്നത് population ആ എടുക്കുന്ന പ്രോസസ്സിനെ പറയുന്നവരാണ് sampling. That's a theory relating this sampling process known as the sampling theory. For the purpose of the population or universe may be defined as an aggregate of item processing a common trial. So there is equal chances. In other words, universe is the complete group of item about which knowledge is sought. The universe may be finite or the infinite. The samples are the part. Suppose you are selecting 1 to 100 number, that is the population, and selecting the certain numbers from this 1 to 100, that is the samples. So the population may be the infinite or the finite. നമുക്കൊരു പോപ്പുലേഷൻ നമുക്കറിയാം ചിലപ്പോൾ മേ ബി ഫൈനൈറ്റ് ആയിരിക്കാം, ചിലപ്പോൾ ദർ മേ ബി ചാൻസ് ഫോർ ദി ഇൻഫൈനൈറ്റ്. You're selecting your the samples from your the population and systematically. The term is known as your the sampling theory. Okay, that is the meaning of the sampling theory. The sampling is a part of the samples. Suppose a selecting process is known as the sampling theory. Suppose you're selecting the samples from your the population, that is the sampling theory. That purely depends upon the sampling theory. That means depends upon the universe or the population. Okay, the term is known as your the sampling. There is one example regarding this sampling theory. Okay, then what are the objectives of the sampling theory? As a research point of view, we are focusing on the sample and the sampling theory. And what are the important objectives of the sampling theory? Okay, the basically three important objectives of the sampling theory. The first one is a statistical estimation, and second one is testing of the hypothesis, and third one is statistical inferences. The first important element of the objectives of the sampling theory is statistical estimation. That means the samples are utilized for the data analysis. So there is a statistical estimation. You are collecting a lot of the information through the questionnaire. The questionnaire maybe depends upon your the sampling. So the sampling theories helps in increasing the estimating unknown population parameter from the knowledge of the statistical measure. That means the sampling is always helpful to predicting the unknown population. അല്ല, നമ്മളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ചിലപ്പോൾ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ ഇൻഫൈനൈറ്റ് ആയിരിക്കാം. ഇൻഫൈനൈറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പോപ്പുലേഷനിൽ നിന്ന് നമുക്ക് നല്ല രീതിയിൽ സാമ്പിൾസ് എടുത്തുകൊണ്ട് നമുക്കൊരു സ്റ്റഡി കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ സഹായിക്കുന്ന പ്രോസസ്സാണ് സാമ്പിളിംഗ് തിയറി. സോ it helps in estimating the unknown population parameters from the knowledge of the statistical measure. Okay, so that is one of the important elements. In other words, to obtain the estimate of the parameter from statistics is the main objectives of the sampling theory. So it depends upon the statistical element, the population parameter and the sample parameter. The parameters, the parameters is part of the population, and the inference, statistical inference is a part of your the samples. നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചൊരു എലമെന്റ് ആണ്, ക്യൂട്ടിയിലേക്ക് പഠിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ അറിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്ന കാര്യമാണ്. So the statistical estimation is always helpful to predicting the unknown population and selecting the variable from the unknown population. That is the first important objective of sampling theory, that is a estimation of the unknown population parameters. And the second one is testing of the hypothesis. We all discussed a video regarding the hypothesis. That means a good hypothesis is always related with at least one independent variable, at least two independent variable and one dependent variable. So the testing of the hypothesis, second object of sampling theory, is to enable to decide whether accept or the reject hypothesis. And that hypothesis are purely depends upon the population and samples. നമുക്കറിയാം population sample കണക്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും നമ്മൾ പലപ്പോഴും hypothesis മേക്ക് ചെയ്യുക. So it's always observe the differences, whether it's any significant difference in the population mean and sample mean can be easily decided with help of the sampling theory. So the second important objective is the testing of the hypothesis. Okay, and third one is the statistical inferences. The sampling theory help to make the generalization about the population. That means that this sampling theory is always help to the researcher for the generalization and generalization of the results, and also help to determine the accuracy of the generalization. That means നമുക്ക് samples വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് samples of the data analysis കൊണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ population exactly predict ചെയ്യുക. So it's always helpful for the generalization. And these are the three important objectives of the sampling theory. The one is a statistical estimation. That means it helps estimating the unknown population. And another one is testing of the hypothesis. And third one is the statistical inferences. Okay, these are the objectives of sampling theory. And what are the process of the sampling? How we can conduct the sampling? So listen, and basically 7 steps regarding the process of the sampling. The first step is identify the population. The first important step is you must identify your the population. That means where we are conducting your the study, and your the population is a finite or the infinite. Suppose you are conducting study in India. India is your population. So the identify the peoples are living in India. So that is your the population. So the first important element is identifying your the population. Okay, suppose you're conducting the study related to the doctors are your the population. So you must identify the population for your study. So that is the first important step is identifying your the population. And the second one is determine the size of your the sample set. That means number of samples are used for your study. നമുക്കറിയുന്ന പോലെ പലപ്പോഴും ബേബി 50, 40 can അങ്ങനെ സെലക്ട് ചെയ്യാറുണ്ട് നിങ്ങൾ പ്രൊജക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത്. So as a good method is the conducting the pilot study, and samples are designing on the base of the pilot study. So there is a lot of the mathematical calculation we will discuss in the next lecture. So the second important step is the determination of the size of the sample, whether it is 50 or 100, 150. That is decided on the base of the sampling study. Okay, so the second one is the determination of the size of the sample, and third one is providing the medium for the base of selection of the sample. Then which medium are used for selecting the sample from the population? That's the medium. നമുക്കറിയാം എങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിലും എടുക്കുന്നത്, എന്ത് മീഡിയം മുഖേന, ക്വസ്റ്റനെയർസ് മുഖേനയാണ് നിങ്ങൾ എടുക്കുന്നത്, അതർ ഷെഡ്യൂൾസ് ആണ് നിങ്ങൾ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ഒബ്സർവേഷൻ ആണ് യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് എ വെരി ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻറ്റ് എലമെന്റ്, the medium for the selection of step. That means whether we mostly using the questionnaires and schedules. Okay, and fourth one is a method. Specify the method, whether it's systematic sampling, simple random sampling, stratified sampling. ഏത് മെത്തേഡാണ് നിങ്ങൾ ഓപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യണത്. That's the fourth important steps of the sampling. And fifth one is checking whether the formed sample set containing the element of the actual matches and different attribute of the population with a large variation in between. നിങ്ങളുടെ പോപ്പുലേഷനുമായിട്ട് കണക്റ്റഡ് അല്ലേ നിങ്ങളുടെ സാമ്പിൾസ് വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്, എത്രത്തോളം വേരിയേഷൻസ് പോപ്പുലേഷനിൽ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. യു മസ്റ്റ് ബി ഡിസൈഡ് ദറ്റ് ഇസ് എ വേരിയേഷൻ ബിറ്റ്വീൻ ദ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ ആൻഡ് ദ സാമ്പിൾ. ദാറ്റ്സ് വൺ ഓഫ് ദ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻറ്റ് സ്റ്റെപ്സ്. ദ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ, the samples are representing the population or not, must be decided. That's the fifth important step, is check whether the found sample set. Okay, and sixth one is checking for the errors or inaccurate estimation. There is a possibility for the sampling error. Error means the error arising whenever you are conducting the sample. You must check the errors occurred in the sampling process. That is the sixth step of the process of the sampling. And the last step, the set we get the after performing above step actually contributing the sample set. നിങ്ങൾ ചെയ്ത എല്ലാ സ്റ്റെപ്സും നിങ്ങളുടെ സാമ്പിളിലേക്ക് നിങ്ങൾ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ദറ്റ് മീൻസ് യു ആർ പെർഫോമിംഗ് ദ above steps actually contribute to the sample set. That means you are the decision of the investigator, the decision of the research. Okay, and these are the 7 important steps regarding the process of the sampling. The first one is identify the population set, and second one is determination of the size, and third one is providing the medium, and fourth one is the picking of the sample through the different methods: simple, random, systematic, stratified method. Fifth one is check whether the framed sample set contain the actual element. Another one is identify the errors and ensuring the entire steps and which specifically contributing the sample set. And these are the important process of the sampling. Okay, the next moving to the techniques of the sampling. Okay, the sampling methods can be classified into. As a good researcher, there's a method, two important methods. One is a probability, another one is non-probability. The probability means there is equal chance of getting, and non-probability is sometimes the convenience of the researcher. And what are the probability method and what are the non-probability method? Now, probability is simple random, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, the multi-chase sampling. It's including the multi, that's the different elements. And non-probability sampling is corpus sampling, snowball sampling, judgment sampling, self-selection. Those are the important types of the non-probability sampling. I think you are familiar with the entire methods in the degree classes. If we just again refreshing, what are the methods used for the sampling? Okay, let's start. The first method is the probability sampling method. The first important element is probability method. That means there is equal chances for the selecting the samples. Okay, the probability, the first one is the simple random. That means you are selecting the randomly. We're using the random numbers and the tippet numbers, yard correction factors, and lottery method that we use for simple random. നമ്മളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് randomly select ചെയ്യുക ലോട്ടറി മെത്തേഡോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റാൻഡം നമ്പേഴ്സ് വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ randomly select ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രോസസ് that is known as the simple random sampling. And second one is a systematic sampling. That means the individuals are selected regular interval from the sampling frame. That means you are selecting that regularly. That means you are dividing the population and you are selecting the samples regularly. Suppose you are dividing the 5 groups, you are selecting the fifth number from the first group, and systematically the second group you are selecting the fifth number, and third group you are selecting then another number, fifth number. So that is a logical element. That is systematically. നമ്മൾ അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യുന്ന സാമ്പിൾ നമ്മൾ പറയാറുണ്ട് that is a systematic sampling ആണ്. അപ്പോൾ ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് എ പ്രോസസ് സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക്കലി. അല്ലെ എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ യു ആർ സ്റ്റഡിങ് ദ കോളേജ്, നിങ്ങളുടെ കോളേജിൽ നിന്ന് ഡിഗ്രി സ്റ്റുഡൻസിൽ BSc-കാരെയാണ് എടുക്കുന്നത്. ഈ കോളേജിൽ BSc-കാർ എടുത്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അടുത്ത കോളേജിൽ നിങ്ങൾ BSc-കാർ തന്നെ എടുക്കണം. PSc ആണ്. അപ്പോൾ BSc കെമിസ്ട്രിക്കാരാണ് എടുക്കണമെങ്കിൽ അടുത്ത കോളേജിൽ നിങ്ങൾ BSc കെമിസ്ട്രിക്കാർ തന്നെ എടുക്കണം. ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക് അറേഞ്ച്മെന്റ്. ദാറ്റ് പ്രോസസ് ഇസ് നോൺ ആസ് യുവർ സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക് സാമ്പിളിംഗ്. ആൻഡ് തേർഡ് വൺ ഈസ് ദ സ്ട്രാറ്റിഫൈഡ് sampling. And this method, the population is firstly divided into subgroups. You are dividing the stratas. Your populations are divided into the strata and who all share the similar characteristics. ഇവിടെ നമ്മൾ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു സെയിം പക്ഷേ ഇവിടെ സ്ട്രാറ്റയിൽ ഡിവൈഡ് ചെയ്യും. അവിടെ ഇക്വാലിറ്റി എന്ന കൺസെപ്റ്റ് അഞ്ചാമത്തെ വരെയാണ് അഞ്ചാമത്തെ ആളെടുക്കുക, അപ്പുറത്തെ കോളേജിൽ അഞ്ചാമത്തെ ആളിനെ എടുക്കും. പക്ഷേ ഇവിടെ വരുമ്പോൾ അഗെയിൻ ഡിവൈഡ് സ്ട്രാറ്റയ്ക്കാണ് ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ്. സ്ട്രാറ്റിഫൈഡ് സാമ്പിളിംഗ് ഓഫ് ദ populations are firstly divided into subgroups. That is a very important element. The college is classified into the PG student, the degree students, and the diploma students. That is a strata. That's a classification of the strata. The third one is a stratified sampling, and fourth one is a cluster sampling. That means it is sampled subgroups again. Here the populations are heterogeneous characteristics. That's very important element. The population divided in subgroups, and that is known as a clusters, and which are randomly selected including the study. That means the clusters are framing on the basis of the study. The term is known as the clustered sampling. And there is sometimes the populations are heterogeneous. The population are heterogeneous sectoral. The population divide in subgroups side again divide in, but a cluster importance. It's known as the cluster. And these are the four important method of the sampling under the probability: the simple random, systematic, stratified sampling, and the cluster sampling. And part of the non-probability sampling method, and the familiar because research ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ എഴുതി വെക്കാറുണ്ട് that is a lot of non-probability sampling method, purpose sampling അല്ലെങ്കിൽ convenience sampling method. And as a practical point of view, these are irrelevance. Sometimes there is irrelevance. So this is a method. What are the non-probability sampling methods? Okay, and the first method is the convenience sampling method. The convenience sampling means is the convenience of the research. That means select the sample as per the convenience of the research. That term is known as the convenience sampling method. The convenience sampling perhaps the easiest method of the sampling because the participants are selected based on the availability and the willingness to take part. That means there is a freedom of the research. The first non-probability sampling, that is your convenience sampling. And second one is the quota sampling, and this method is sampling often used by the market researchers. It's mainly for the marketing research, and interviews are given the quota. They give a specific quota. You conduct in study on the 50 group. But a quota range ചെയ്യണം. ഒരാൾക്ക് നിങ്ങൾ ഇത്ര പേരെ സ്റ്റഡി കണ്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യണം. Then assigning the quota and specific type of the attempt to recruit. So it's an example. So there is specifying the quota for the researcher. The term of sampling is known as the quota sampling. The first one is the convenience sampling, and the second one is the quota sampling, and the third one, that is a judgment sampling. That's very important element is the judgment. The judgment is also known as a pervasive sampling method. That's a pervasive sampling. Judgment sampling is also known as the pervasive sampling. And this techniques relies on the judgment of the researcher. It is a judgment. That is a judgment desired by the researcher when choosing to ask the participant. That is a judgment point of view, as a researcher point of view, researcher make the judgment selecting the sample, that is known as a judgment or the purpose. നിങ്ങൾ സ്റ്റഡി കണ്ടക്ട് കോളേജ് സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന് സ്റ്റഡി കണ്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾ സെൻറ് തോമസ് കോളേജിനെ തന്നെ എടുക്കുകയാണ്, ദാറ്റ്സ് എ പെർപ്പസീവ്, ദാറ്റ്സ് ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് ഓഫ് യുവർ റിസർച്ച്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെ പെർപ്പസീവായിട്ട് എടുക്കുന്ന സാമ്പിൾസിനെ പറയുന്നതാണ് ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദ ജഡ്ജ്മെന്റ് സാമ്പിളിംഗ് മെത്തേഡ്. ആൻഡ് ദ ലാസ്റ്റ് വൺ ഈസ് ദ സ്നോബോൾ സാമ്പിളിംഗ്. സ്നോബോൾ സാമ്പിളിംഗ് മീൻസ് കോമൺ ഗ്രൂപ്പ്സിനെ ഐഡൻറ്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യുക. നിങ്ങൾ ചോദിക്കുകയാണ് ഇനി എവിടെയാണ് കോമൺ ഗ്രൂപ്പ്സ് വരുന്നത്, യു ജസ്റ്റ് ഐഡൻറ്റിഫൈ ദ കോമൺ ഗ്രൂപ്പ്സ്. ദിസ് മെത്തേഡ് ഈസ് commonly used in social science when investigating hard to research group. അത് നിങ്ങളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് നിങ്ങൾ സ്റ്റഡി കണ്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യണം. അപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ആവശ്യമായ സ്പെസിമെൻ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കിട്ടുന്നില്ല, അപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങൾക്കൊരു സ്പെസിമെൻ കിട്ടി, പിന്നെ അയാളോട് തന്നെ ചോദിക്കും ദെൻ എവിടെയാണ് ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരാളുള്ളത്, അവരെ ആൻസർ ചെയ്യും, അയാളെടുത്ത് പിന്നെ then അടുത്ത ആളെടുത്ത് പോയി നിങ്ങൾ ഡാറ്റ കളക്ട് ചെയ്യും, എവിടെയാണ് അടുത്ത ആളുള്ളത് നിങ്ങൾ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ചോദിക്കും, അങ്ങനെ ചോദിച്ചു പോകുന്ന സിസ്റ്റമാണത്. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് എക്സിസ്റ്റിംഗ് സബ്ജക്ട്സ് ആർ ആസ്ക്ഡ് ടു നോമിനേറ്റ് ദ ഫർദർ സബ്ജക്ട് നോൺ ടു ദം. ദാറ്റ് മീൻസ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറിയുന്നവരിൽ നിന്ന് ഡാറ്റ നിങ്ങൾ എടുത്തെടുത്ത് പോവുകയാണ്, അതൊന്ന് ചോദിച്ച് നിങ്ങൾ പോകുന്ന പ്രോസസ്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് നോൺ ആസ് യുവർ ദ സ്നോബോൾ സാമ്പിളിംഗ്. സോ ദിസ് മെത്തേഡ് ഈസ് മെയിൻലി യൂസ്ഡ് ഫോർ സോഷ്യൽ സയൻസ്. സോഷ്യൽ സയൻസിനാണ് അത് ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ നമ്മൾ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുക. ഓക്കെ, ദീസ് ആർ ദ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻറ്റ് മെത്തേഡ് ആൻഡ് ആസ് ജസ്റ്റ് സ്പെസിഫൈഡ് സം ഓഫ് ദ മെത്തേഡ്സ്. നമുക്കറിയാം ഒരുപാട് മെത്തേഡ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. നിങ്ങൾ ഡിഗ്രിക്ക് പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള അതേ മെത്തേഡ്സ് തന്നെ നമ്മൾ കുറച്ച് മെത്തേഡ്സ് സ്പെസിഫൈ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സിമ്പിൾ, റാൻഡം, സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക്, സ്ട്രാറ്റിഫൈ, cluster, the multi-stage sampling. So if you are conducting the different methods, systematic, simple, random, you are opting the 2 or 3 methods. The method is known as the multi-stage sampling. You are opting simple, random, systematic and stratified sampling within the same structure. The term is known as the multi-stage sampling. Quota, snowball, purposive, self-selection, the convenience, all are the important element. Okay, these are the important methods of the sampling. So once again we discuss this lecture what you mean by this population and what is a sample. The population and the sample. The population means is the totality of your study, that is known as the population, and samples are only the portion, subset of your the population. This is one of the important examples regarding the population and your the sample. And what you mean by the sampling theory, that means it's a process opting for selecting the sample, that is known as your sampling theory. These are the objectives of the sampling theory: statistical estimation, the testing of the hypothesis, and the statistical inferences. These are the important objectives of the sampling theory, and these are the process of the sampling: selection of the population, determining the size, providing the medium, decide the method, check whether the sample frame, and checking the errors, and you must be ensuring the these are the contributing of the sample set. These are the process of your the sampling, and these are the methods of sampling: the probability and the non-probability, simple, random, systematic, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, non-probability point of view, convenience, contour sampling, judgment sampling, snowball sampling. These are the methods in your the sampling. Okay, and I hope you understand everything, because these are the similar elements in your the degree classes: method of samples and the sampling. Okay, so thank you, and thank you for watching me.